Alright, this is number 17 in the MacArthur Study Bible and also the Prager Rational Bible, because 17 is pretty short and there's not a whole lot of notes, so I think I'm going to go ahead and do both of them together like I did with chapter 2. Alright, well, I'll start with MacArthur first. Alright, the budding of Aaron's rod. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and get from them a rod from each father's house, all their leaders according to their fathers' households, 12 rods. Write each man's name on his rod, and you shall write Aaron's name on the rod of Levi, for there shall be one rod for the head of each father's house. And then you shall place them in the tabernacle of meeting before the testimony, where I meet with you. And it shall be that the rod of man whom I choose will blossom. Thus I will rid myself of the complaints of the children of Israel, which they make against you. And so Moses spoke to the children of Israel, and each of their leaders gave him a rod apiece, for each leader according to their fathers' houses, 12 rods, and the rod of Aaron was among their rods. And Moses placed the rods before the Lord in the tabernacle of witness. And now it came to pass on the next day that Moses went into the tabernacle of witness, and behold, the rod of Aaron of the house of Levi had sprouted and put forth buds, and it had produced blossoms and yielded ripe almonds. And Moses brought all the rods from before the Lord to all the children, and they looked, and each man took his rod. And the Lord said to Moses, Bring Aaron's rod back before the testimony to be kept as a sign against the rebels, that you may put their complaints away from me, lest they die. And thus did Moses, just as the Lord had commanded him, so he did. And so the children of Israel spoke to Moses, saying, Surely we die, we perish, we all perish. Whoever comes near the tabernacle of the Lord must die. Shall we all utterly die? And that's the end of 17. All right. So basically, in this little chapter, each of the tribes, all the leaders of their tribes had to bring 12 rods and write each man's name on it. And even Aaron did this with Levi, which of course Levi wasn't counted as like one of the tribes in the census, but that's alright. Alright, but anyway, these 12 sticks of wood, these rods, were to bear the names of the 12 tribes, with the tribe of Levi replaced by the name Aaron. And they were to bring these rods in the tabernacle of meeting before the testimony, which the testimony would be the 10 Commandments, written on the two stone tablets that are kept in the Ark of the Covenant. So the phrase before my testimony is before the Ark. Alright. And then God said, The rod of the man whom I choose will blossom, thus I'll rid myself of the complaints of Israel which they make against you. And Aaron's rod ended up blossoming over all the other ones. Yep, so God had stated that the stick of man he had chosen would blossom, and the stick of Aaron had not only blossomed, but yielded ripe almonds. And thus God has exceeded the demands of the test, so there would be no uncertainty of the fact that Aaron was chosen to be the high priest, and thus that could squelch all rebellion that maybe still lingered, maybe even after Korah and those rebels were dealt with. Yeah. So Aaron's rod that blossomed and brought forth fruit was to be kept as an indication of God's choice in order to permanently stop the murmuring of the rebellious Israelites. Yep. So bring Aaron's rod before the testimony to be kept as a sign against the rebels, that you may put their complaints away from me, lest they die. And then at the very end, the children of Israel spoke to Moses, saying, Surely we die, we perish, we all perish. Whoever even comes near the tabernacle of the Lord must die. Shall we all utterly die? And finally, the people actually realized their sin in challenging Aaron's role as the high priest. Yep, whoever comes near the tabernacle of the Lord must die. So the people's fear of going near to the Lord, it led to a reaffirmation of the priesthood of Aaron and his sons, which ultimately continues in chapter 18. Yeah, and it looks like 18 is going to reiterate some of the duties, I guess, of the priesthood, even though it's been talked about before, but it looks like it gets reiterated some a little bit. I guess, in order to, still deal with the rebellion that happened previously in 16, and of course to, remind the people that God to remind the people that He chose Aaron and the Levites to be the priests and to serve in the tabernacle. All right. Well, that's all the notes for MacArthur. Now I guess I'll see what Prager has to say. Man, that was pretty short. All right, now as I mentioned last time, the verses for the Jewish scriptures are not the same as the Christian ones. So non-Jewish editions of the Bible begin Numbers 17 at verse 36, which would be verse 36 for us, for 16. So that means that the first 15 verses are chapter 16 for the Christians, and verses 36 through 50 in 16 are for Christians, but for the Jews, they would be the first 17 verses, the first 15 verses in chapter 17. So I'll read the verses, and then I'll mention the Jewish one, and then the Jewish one, and then the Christian one. All right, the case for hereditary priesthood. So 7:1, but for us 16:36. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, 7:2, 16:37. Order Eleazar, son of Aaron, the priest. So why did God assign the task to Eleazar and not his father Aaron? Well, we cannot know for sure. It probably was in order to make clear that to the Israelites that the priests were to be descendants of Aaron and no one else, including other Levites, who would not be descendant of Aaron. And to the modern ears, hereditary positions sound primitive because they're not democratic. Israelite priests were not chosen by popular vote, and they were not appointed by Israelite leaders, or an electoral college, which is how our country would choose the president. But you don't have that type of system. But hereditary priesthood was not primitive. It was probably actually the most effective way to prevent political and financial corruption or even violence. And no one could compete for this status, just as there are no false pretenders to the British crown. Whereas democracy can work, it doesn't always in the secular realm. It cannot work in religious life, where right and wrong are determined by laws and principles given by God, not by men. No one voted on the 10 Commandments. True. Even in secular life, democracy, choosing leaders by majority vote, is actually morally perilous. And Sir Winston Churchill, who was the Prime Minister of Britain during World War II, he said in 1947, in this speech to the House of Commons, he said this: "Many forms of government have been tried and will be tried in this world of sin and woe. And no one pretends that democracy is perfect or all-wise. Indeed, it has been said that democracy is the worst form of government, except for all of those other forms that have been tried." Well, there you go. Yeah, well, communism definitely doesn't work. Socialism doesn't. So, for democracy to work, most voting citizens have to be essentially decent and educated to some degree and possess some wisdom. And knowing this was rarely the case, the longest existing free world in the country in the world, the U.S., was not set up to be a pure democracy. Yep. And the American president is not elected by a national popular vote, but by votes of each state. Yeah, in the electoral college, where each state, all the different electors of the state can, choose the next president. Yep. And the Senate, one of the two houses of Congress, is also not democratic. Yeah, every state, no matter how many or how few inhabitants live in it, they have 2 senators. And originally, senators were not elected by a popular vote, but by each state's legislature. If priests, in the Hebrew here is Kohanim, however you say that, if they were democratically elected and any Israelite could have been voted into it, Israelites who wanted the honor would have spent their lifetime like modern politicians do, campaigning for the position and raising money to fund their campaigns. And that alone would have debased the priesthood. Imagine posters saying this: "Vote for so-and-so for priest, or worse, maybe vote for so-and-so for high priest." In addition, some of those seeking the position would engage in demagoguery or try to buy their way into the priesthood. Be evil about it. Yeah. And of course, even the priesthood in the Bible wasn't perfect. Especially in 1 Samuel with Eli's 2 sons, Hophni and Phinehas. Yeah, how well did that turn out? Alright, we'll continue with verse 2 or verse 1637. Yep. So, order Eleazar the son of Aaron the priest to remove the fire pans, for they have become sacred, from among the charred remains, and scatter the coals abroad. 1638. Okay, you get the point, I guess. I probably don't have to keep doing that. Remove the fire pans of those who have sinned at the cost of their lives, and let them be made into hammered sheets as plating for the altar. For once they have been used for offering to the Lord, they have become sacred, and let them serve as a warning to the people of Israel. So why did God instruct Eleazar to use the rebels' fire pans as plating on the holy altar? Well, the most obvious explanation is the one given in this verse. Once used for holy service, they are sacred. But given that the verse adds the words, "let them serve as a warning to the people of Israel," there are likely additional reasons. And Ronald Allen offers this explanation, and he says this: "From that time on, the sheet of bronze over the altar would be a memorial of the utter folly of the self-proclaimed priest of the Most High God. And their families would know, their neighbors would remember, Every time they looked at the altar or thought of it again, they would be forced to remember the folly of their fathers. Yeah, and I guess the folly of Korah and the rebels. And we suspect that God's desire in the memorial was not to perpetrate his wrath, but to prevent further reasons to provoke it. Yeah, to remind the people, you better not, sin as Korah and the rebels did, because it did not go well for them. So let that be a reminder. So this was preventative symbolism. If another man were to approach the altar with the censer, and if he were not of the descendants of Aaron, the sparkling light of the sun dancing on the hammered metal should sparkle in his eyes as a threat of doom. And there's another possible explanation for why God instructed Moses and Aaron to use the fire pans of the rebels as plating on the sacred altar. Well, it symbolizes an important rule of life. A physical object cannot be intrinsically bad. People and their behaviors can be good or evil. Objects cannot. A gun used to shoot children is not bad. I wonder if that's... Well, the gun itself is actually not bad, but the person using it to shoot children, that is bad. Yeah, the person's bad. A gun used to protect children against a shooter is also not good. Yeah. The person using it to protect the children, well, you're not good according to God, because being good is being perfect, and none of us are that, so that's why we need a Savior. Yeah. But anyway. But criminals using knives to hurt people, and surgeons using knives to save people's lives. The knives themselves are not good or bad. Yeah, it's, the person using it for whatever reason, sinfully or not. So, anyway. But this is not true only of inanimate objects. It's also true of human actions. And, there are almost no inherently bad actions. Okay, I'll see what he's saying here. Many people, both religious and irreligious, believe some actions are intrinsically wrong, but almost none are. Well, God determines what is, ultimately through the Word. But anyway, I'll see what else he has to say. We determine the morality of an act. What determine the morality of an act are its purposes and its condition and its circumstances. Now, lying is almost always wrong, but sometimes it is moral. Just as when the non-Jews who hid the Jews during the Holocaust lied to the Nazis when they denied they were hiding the Jews, or maybe in the 19th century, Americans who hid runaway slaves and they lied to the bounty hunters. Or even a biblical example in Joshua 2, whenever the prostitute Rahab hides the spies and she lies to the local leaders because they're, asking about them, and she tells them to go and pursue them, and they do, and then she helps them escape. Now, of course, lying is definitely, it's a sin, obviously. Yeah. So, I don't know if maybe that could definitely be an exception. Obviously, you probably would do that if you were in a situation like this, because ultimately you're looking out for the other person. So, yeah. But probably other than that, I guess, you shouldn't lie, period. So, alright, now sex can be holy within marriage, and it can be evil. like with rape. And there is moral violence, self-defense, and defense of the innocent, and immoral violence, inflicting intentional harm on the innocent. So the 10 Commandments prohibit murder, not killing, which would be the immoral violence. Murder by definition is immoral killing. And there is moral killing. Like God wiping out Canaanites because of their sin. That's not murder. That's not murder. For full discussion of this subject, see the essay Moral Absolutes, Moral Relativism, and Situational Ethics at Exodus 1:19. Which I think that's whenever the midwives end up defying the order of Pharaoh to kill the babies. Which that was good. Alright, verse 4, 1639. Eleazar the priest took the copper fire pins which had been used for offering by those who died in the fire, and they were hammered into plating for the altar, as the Lord had ordered him through Moses. It was to be a reminder to the Israelites so that no outsider, not one of Aaron's offspring, should presume to offer incense before the Lord and suffer the fate of Korah and his band. And once again, a miracle doesn't produce faith. 6. Next day, the whole Israelite community railed against Moses and Aaron, saying, "You have brought death upon the Lord's people." What? No! One would think that the day after Korah and his followers were swallowed by the earth and the other rebel leaders were consumed by fire, the people's faith in God would have been the strongest. Yet the whole Israelite community railed against Moses and Aaron. Once again, we see that miracles, nature-defying events most people believe should provide the most powerful arguments for belief in God, but they don't necessarily bring people to faith. As Abraham said, they're not going to hear Moses, not going to hear the prophets, they're not even going to believe, even if somebody were to come back from the dead. You don't believe the words of God ultimately, you're not even going to believe even with the miracles that he does. If people do not see the existence of the world, of infinitely complex biological life, of consciousness and self-awareness, and of the human brain and the human mind, all of which are miracles experienced deadly as evidence for belief in God, additional miracles are not likely to work. And ultimately you don't believe in the scriptures, then you're not even going to believe again, even if somebody were to come back from the dead. The reason I have titled this work The Rational Bible is because I regard reason as more powerful than miracles in bringing people to faith in God. And reason does play a role in, faith. I mean, you use reason to defend the faith, apologetics, be ready to give an answer for the hope that's in you. We bring down lofty arguments, taking the thoughts captive to make them obedient to Christ, loving God with your mind. I mean, reason is included in that, obviously. But at the end of the day, even rational arguments are not going to convince somebody to believe either, not as well as miracles. So it's only the Spirit that can ultimately produce faith in salvation. So ultimately. In what must be considered one of the most irrational moments depicted in the Torah, the Israelites held Moses responsible for the earth opening and fire spontaneously appearing out of nowhere. If the people really believed Moses could open the earth and bring down fire on their enemies, wouldn't that alone, if only out of fear, suffice to make them stop their rebellion? Wouldn't that alone make it obvious that Moses and Aaron were chosen by God? But as the community gathered against them, Moses and Aaron turned toward the tent of meeting. The cloud had covered it, and the presence of the Lord appeared. And according to Joseph Hertz, the cloud was God's symbol of protection to God's loyal servants against the threatening mob. And it was also a sign that God desired an audience with Moses and Aaron. And when Moses and Aaron reached the tent of meeting, the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Remove yourselves from this community, that I may annihilate them in an instant." And they fell on their faces. God again threatened annihilation of this community. But he also made it clear that Moses, and this time Aaron as well, could prevent the disaster by removing themselves from the community. Instead of following God's command, "Remove yourselves from the community," they fell on their faces and they prayed on behalf of the very people rebelling against them. They were basically the intercessors. Ultimately pointing to the real intercessor, mediator between God and man, Jesus. And Moses said to Aaron, "Take the fire pan and put it on the fire from the altar, add incense and take it quickly to the community and make expiation for them, for wrath has gone forth from the Lord, the plague has begun." Though Moses and Aaron were able to stop God from annihilating the community, God had already sent a plague against it. Moses therefore urged his brother to begin a ceremony of atonement. And Aaron took it as Moses had ordered, and ran to the midst of the congregation where the plague had begun among the people. And by this act Aaron demonstrated great faith in God. The plague could have stricken him, but he ignored the danger to himself, and he ran to the midst of the congregation where the plague had begun. And Aaron put on the incense and made expiation for the people. He stood between the dead and the living until the plague was checked. And Jesus stood in our place and took on the full wrath of God. And those who died in the plague came to 14,700, aside from those who died on account of Korah. And Aaron then returned to Moses at the entrance of the tent of meeting, since the plague was checked. Okay, now you get to verse 16 for the Jews in chapter 17, and now I get to chapter 17 for the Christians. So verse 1 here. So just finished the last part of 16 for us Christians. All right, now here we go. Officially now 17. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the Israelite people, and take from them, from the chieftains of their ancestral houses, 1 staff for each chieftain of an ancestral house, 12 staffs in all. Ascribe each man's name on his staff, there being 1 staff for each head of an ancestral house. Also inscribe Aaron's name on the staff of Levi, and deposit them into the tent of meeting before the pact where I meet with you. Or, as MacArthur put it, the testimony, but Prager saying pact here. But of course, it's referring to the stone tablets inscribed with the 10 Commandments. The staff of the man whom I choose shall sprout, and I will rid myself of this incessant mutterings of the Israelites against you. So despite the failures from both the previous miracle, the earth swallowing and the fire consuming rebels, and the plague to end the rebellion, God delivered another miracle, this time specifically on behalf of Aaron. All the tribes were to hand over their chieftain's staff made of dead wood to be placed in the tent of meeting. The staff of God's chosen leader would sprout foliage, presumably after only Aaron's staff would spring to life. the people would finally accept him as high priest. And Moses spoke thus to the Israelites. Their chieftains gave him a staff for each chieftain of an ancestral house, 12 staffs in all. Among those staffs was that of Aaron. Moses deposited the staffs before the Lord in the tent of the pact. The next day Moses entered the tent of the pact, and there the staff of Aaron of the house of Levi was sprouted. It had brought forth sprouts, produced blossoms, and borne almonds. And then Moses brought out all the staffs from before the Lord. All the Israelites each identified and recovered his staff. And the Lord said to Moses, "Put Aaron's staff back before the pact to be kept as a lesson to the rebels, so that their muttering may cease, lest they die." And thus Moses did as the Lord had commanded him, so he did. But the Israelites said to Moses, "Lo, we perish, we are lost, all of us are lost." And then the last verse. Everyone who so much as ventures near the Lord's tabernacle must die. Alas, we are doomed to perish. And neither God nor Moses said anything like, "Whoever so as much ventures near the Lord's tabernacle must die." What God said was that the living staff should be a lesson to the people to stop their mutterings against him, by muttering against his appointed leaders, lest they die. And this is reminiscent of what the woman in the Garden of Eden did when, referring to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, she told the serpent, "God said, you shall not eat of it or touch it, lest you die." She completely misinterpreted what God had said, that Adam and Eve were not to eat from the tree. Not to refrain from touching it. But of course, if you start touching it, then you'll probably eat it. See the commentary at Genesis 3:3. Misquoting God or man can lead to catastrophic consequences. And that's in the Genesis Rational Bible. Similarly here, Israelites invented a divine prohibition not to venture near the tabernacle. People who are in the wrong frequently construct a narrative that depicts them as the wronged party. And that was true 3,200 years ago, and it's true today. And I wonder if this, in a way, with Aaron's rod really prospering, and it's a sign basically to not be muttering or rebelling against the appointed leaders of the Lord. I wonder if that could also be pointing to, maybe, God ultimately, proving that his son was the Messiah, who was rejected ultimately by the people, by the people, who is the ultimate high priest, and God has raised him up, and now he's sitting at the right throne of God. And since that's the case, you would be wise to not be rebelling against him or muttering against him. Rather, you should draw near to him, ultimately. Otherwise you'll end up like Korah and all the rebels. And it won't be nice. Alright, well, that's pretty much the end of 17, so both of those were pretty short. So that's awesome. Alright, well, Lord willing, I'll get to 18 next time. And until then, may God bless you and the grace and mercy won by Jesus, the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with you all.